There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, a weight in your chest that doesn't lift, no matter how many deep breaths you take. It's not just tiredness. It's something deeper, something heavier. It's the slow, creeping realization that you're stuck. Being stuck doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always a rock bottom moment, not always a catastrophic event that forces change. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the same routine, the same patterns, the same conversations, the same frustrations playing on a loop. It's waking up every day knowing exactly what will happen and feeling no excitement about any of it. It's the slow erosion of enthusiasm, the dull ache of knowing that something is missing, but not knowing what to do about it. Maybe you felt it in a job you once loved, but now dread. You go through the motions, meet the deadlines, attend the meetings, but inside there's an emptiness. The spark you once had is gone. You tell yourself you should be grateful. After all, plenty of people would love to be in your position. So you silence that little voice inside you that keeps whispering, "This isn't it anymore." Or maybe you felt it in a relationship. You tell yourself that things aren't that bad. You know the rhythms of each other's days, the predictable conversations, the way you avoid certain topics to keep the peace. But something feels off. There's a loneliness that sits between the two of you, even when you're in the same room. You remember how things used to feel, how effortless connection once was, and you wonder if you're supposed to fight for it or if you're just afraid of letting go. Sometimes being stuck doesn't even have a clear cause. It's just a nagging sense that you were meant for more, but you don't know what more looks like. You feel uninspired, unmotivated, like you're sleepwalking through your own life. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that maybe you're just overthinking things, but deep down, you know that something needs to change. The problem is, change is uncomfortable, and so we resist it. We convince ourselves that staying put is the safer option. We tell ourselves that certainty, even if it's unfulfilling, is better than risking the unknown. But here's the thing about staying stuck. It doesn't just make you feel restless. Over time, it starts to eat away at you. It starts to manifest in ways you don't expect. The exhaustion turns into irritability. The lack of fulfillment starts to drain your energy. The weight of staying in the wrong place for too long begins to show up physically, in stress, in headaches, in tension you carry in your shoulders. You start feeling resentment toward people who seem freer, people who are stepping into new seasons of their lives while you feel trapped in yours. You scroll through social media and feel a pang of jealousy when you see someone starting over, someone taking risks, someone doing what you've been too afraid to do. And then comes the inner dialogue, the justifications, the excuses, the rationalizations. Maybe this is just how life is supposed to feel. Maybe everyone feels like this and no one talks about it. Maybe I'm asking for too much. But the truth is, you do know. You know when something no longer fits. You know when you've outgrown a situation, a job, a relationship, a version of yourself. And the longer you ignore it, the heavier it gets. At first, it's just a whisper, a quiet feeling that something isn't quite right. But over time, it gets louder. It turns into frustration, exhaustion, sadness. You start feeling disconnected from yourself, like you're living someone else's life. And the hardest part, no one else can see it the way you do. From the outside, things might look fine, maybe even good, maybe even great. And that's what makes it even harder to explain. How do you tell people that you feel stuck when they see nothing wrong? How do you explain a longing for change when everything on paper looks stable? So you bury it. You tell yourself to be grateful. You keep showing up, keep doing what's expected, keep pretending that everything is fine. But deep down, you know. And here's what no one tells you about staying stuck. It doesn't just affect you. It affects the people around you. When you're not fully present, the people in your life feel it. When you're unfulfilled, your energy shifts. The way you show up in relationships, in conversations, in the spaces that matter, it all changes. You weren't meant to live a life that feels small. You weren't created to shrink yourself into a space that no longer fits just because it's comfortable. But that's exactly what staying stuck does. It makes you smaller. It convinces you that settling is the safest option. It tells you that change is too risky, that you're being ungrateful for even wanting something different. And so you stay. You keep putting one foot in front of the other, hoping that something will magically shift on its own. You tell yourself that maybe if you just wait a little longer, the feeling will pass. Maybe if you just push through, you'll eventually feel like yourself again. But deep down, you know the truth. There's a moment in every person's life when they stand at the edge of something new. A moment when the familiar world they've known, the patterns, the routines, the certainty starts to feel too small. And in front of them, stretching out like an uncharted road, is something unknown, something different, something they can't fully define but feel drawn toward. And that's where fear shows up. Fear thrives in uncertainty. It whispers questions that sound like reason but are really just doubt in disguise. What if this isn't the right move? What if I fail? What if I walk away from what I know and realize I made a mistake? The mind, desperate to protect us, clings to what's familiar. Even if that familiarity is no longer serving us, even if it's keeping us stuck, it feels safer than taking a step into the unknown. But the thing about life, the thing no one really prepares us for, is that growth requires movement. And movement requires courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear, acknowledging its presence, and deciding to move forward anyway. It's standing in the tension between where you've been and where you're being called, and choosing to step forward even when nothing is guaranteed. Most people wait for certainty before they move. They want a clear sign, a roadmap, a guarantee that the next step will work out. They want to know that if they take the risk, leave the job, end the relationship, start the new venture, it will lead somewhere safe. But that's not how stepping into the unseen works. The truth is, you don't get clarity before you move. You get clarity because you move. Think about the biggest turning points in your life, the moments that truly shaped you. Were they moments of absolute certainty? Or were they moments when you had to step into something unknown, something terrifying, something that stretched you beyond what you thought you were capable of? Courage doesn't show up fully formed. It's not a one-time decision. It's built in small moments, in tiny choices. It's built when you wake up each day and choose to keep going, even when fear tells you to turn back. And here's what makes it even harder. Most people won't understand your decision to step into the unseen. They will project their own fears onto you. They will tell you to play it safe, to think things through, to wait until you have more certainty. Not because they don't want you to succeed, but because they are speaking from their own fears, their own experiences of staying where it felt safe. But you weren't meant to live a life dictated by someone else's fears. There will always be a reason to stay where you are. There will always be an excuse to put it off just a little longer. But eventually you have to ask yourself, am I more afraid of stepping into the unknown or of staying exactly where I am? Because here's the real risk, the risk no one talks about. The risk isn't in stepping into the unseen. The risk is in staying in a life that no longer fits. The risk is in spending years wondering, what if, instead of finding out. The risk is in looking back and realizing you let fear make your choices for you. And the hardest part, the first step. The first step is where everything in you wants to turn back, where you second guess yourself 100 times, where fear feels the loudest. But if you can take that first step, just one step, the next one becomes a little easier, and then the next, and the next. No, it won't be comfortable. Growth never is. There will be moments of doubt. There will be days when you want to run back to what you know. But if you keep moving forward, if you keep choosing courage over comfort, one day you will look back and realize you are standing in a life you once only dreamed of. And it all started with one step, letting go. Letting go can feel like tearing away a piece of yourself. It's painful, it's vulnerable, and it's often the last thing we want to do. But here's the paradox. Sometimes, to gain more, we have to let go of what we're clinging to. And the reason this is so hard is because deep down, we're terrified of emptiness. We're terrified of that space that comes after letting go, but before the new arrives, the space of uncertainty, of nothingness, of waiting. We've been taught to fill our lives, fill them with people, achievements, possessions, noise. We cling to things, even when they're no longer serving us, because it feels safer to hold on to something than to risk having nothing at all. A job that drains us, a relationship that's run its course, a dream we've outgrown. These things might weigh us down, but at least they're known quantities. But holding on to what no longer serves us doesn't make us strong. It makes us stagnant. It keeps our hands so full of what was that we have no room to receive what could be. Letting go requires trust. Trust in the process, trust in the timing, trust in yourself. It's believing that there is more waiting for you on the other side of your release. But that belief doesn't come easy. It demands that we loosen our grip on control, that we release our need to manage outcomes, that we surrender to something greater than ourselves. And control is seductive. It tells us that if we just hold on tighter, plan better, anticipate more, we can avoid pain, avoid disappointment, avoid loss. But control is an illusion. Life moves with or without our consent. Seasons change, people leave, plans unravel. Letting go means facing the fear that maybe we aren't in charge of everything. It means admitting that maybe, just maybe, there's a different plan for us than the one we carefully constructed. And that can feel like a betrayal, like all the hard work, all the effort was for nothing. But it wasn't for nothing. It was for growth. Sometimes we outgrow our own dreams. Sometimes the path we thought we'd walk forever takes a sharp turn. And sometimes what we thought was the finish line is just a resting place on a much longer journey. Letting go doesn't mean we failed. It doesn't mean we're giving up. It means we're making space for new opportunities, new relationships, new growth. It means we're brave enough to say, this no longer fits, and I deserve what does. But the process is messy. It's grieving what was, even as we open to what could be. It's sitting in the discomfort of the in-between, the liminal space where we're no longer who we were, but not yet who we're becoming. It's resisting the urge to fill the void too quickly, to grab onto the next thing that comes along just to avoid feeling empty. And it's in that emptiness that we find clarity. It's in that space of not knowing that we reconnect with ourselves, our true desires, our true values, our true purpose. Because when we're holding on to what's not meant for us, our vision is clouded. We can't see what else is possible. Letting go is an act of faith. It's choosing to believe that the universe is abundant, that there is enough, that we are enough. It's trusting that what is meant for us will not pass us by, but it can't arrive until we've made room for it. And making room is an active process. It's not just about releasing things physically, decluttering our homes, changing our environments. It's about releasing emotionally, letting go of guilt, resentment, fear. It's about letting go of identities that no longer align with who we are becoming, of stories we've told ourselves about what we can and can't have, can and can't do. Instead of, it's about releasing relationships that no longer nurture our souls, even if they once did. It's about acknowledging when we've outgrown a situation or when a situation has outgrown us. And that's hard because it feels like a loss. But loss and gain are two sides of the same coin. Sometimes we have to let go of the good to make room for the great. We have to trust that life is a process of continual becoming. That just because something was right for us once doesn't mean it's right for us forever. And that's okay. It's okay to change, to evolve, to desire new things. It's okay to let go of who we were to make space for who we are becoming. The hardest part is often taking that first step, loosening our grip, opening our hands, allowing what needs to leave to leave. It's a process, and it doesn't happen all at once. Some days we feel brave and ready to release. Other days we find ourselves clinging again, afraid of what we might lose. And that's okay. Letting go is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a daily, sometimes moment by moment choice. It's a muscle we strengthen over time. And the more we practice, the more we realize that letting go isn't about losing it all. It's about gaining everything we didn't even know we needed. How's that? Anything you'd like to tweak or add? Fear here has a way of making everything feel small. Shrinks possibilities, narrows vision, and convinces us that what we see in front of us is all there is. It wraps around our minds, whispering every worst-case scenario, eventual failure, every reason to stay where it's safe. Fear tells us that we are not ready, that we are not capable, that we are not enough. And yet, even in the tightest grip of fear, there is something greater at work. God's plan does not operate within the confines of our fears. It is not limited by our doubts, our hesitations, or our need for control. His plan moves beyond what we can see, beyond what we can predict, beyond what we think is possible. And yet we resist it. Not because we don't believe He is working, but because we are terrified of what trusting Him fully might require. Fear makes us want guarantees. We want to see the whole picture before we take the first step. We want to know the outcome before we make the decision. We want to be assured that the risk will be worth it. And when we don't get that certainty, we hesitate, we stall. We convince ourselves that maybe this isn't the right time, maybe we need more preparation, maybe we should wait for a clearer sign. But faith does not come with a roadmap. It does not come with an itemized list of how everything will unfold. It does not promise comfort or predictability. Faith asks us to step forward before we have the answers. It asks us to move even when our knees are shaking. It asks us to trust that the one who holds the plan is greater than the fear that tries to keep us from it. And yet, fear feels real. It feels like a wall, like an impossible barrier between where we are and where we want to be. We look at our own limitations, our own weaknesses, our own failures, and we tell ourselves that maybe we're not meant to step into something bigger. Maybe we misheard. Maybe we misunderstood. Maybe this dream, this calling, this deep pull towards something greater is not for us after all. But here's the thing, God does not choose the fearless. He does not wait for us to be fully confident before he calls us forward. He calls us in our weakness, in our uncertainty, in our fear, because it is not our strength that carries us, it is his. It is not our confidence that makes the way, it is his plan unfolding, step by step, even when we cannot see it. It just doesn't take a believer to stand still to have him show up to lead us in our journey. We have to just trust in the process, even when we cannot see it. Think about the moments in life when fear was loudest, the moments when everything in you wanted to turn back, when doubt was screaming at you to stay put. And yet somehow you moved forward anyway. And on the other side of that fear, growth, clarity, strength you didn't know you had. Every time you stepped forward despite fear, you proved that fear does not have the final say. And yet we still struggle to trust because fear is relentless. It does not disappear just because we take one courageous step. It follows us, waiting for the next moment of doubt, the next uncertain season, the next difficult decision. And every time it tries to convince us that this is the time we won't make it. This is the time we will fail. This is the time God will forget about us. But fear is a liar. And it has always been a liar. It tells us that we are alone when we are not. It tells us that we are unprepared when God has already equipped us. It tells us that we are too small, too weak, too unworthy to step into something greater when all along, God has been writing a plan that is bigger than anything we could imagine. The problem is we often measure God's plan by what we can see right now. We look at our circumstances, our struggles, our failures, and we decide that if things aren't going smoothly, then maybe we're not on the right path. We assume that if there is difficulty, if there is resistance, then maybe God's plan isn't working out the way it should. But God's plan does not guarantee an easy path. It guarantees purpose. It guarantees growth. It guarantees that every single thing, even the struggles, even the pain, even the moments that feel like failure, is being woven into something greater. We were not created to live small lives dictated by fear. We were not meant to stay in places that feel safe but stagnant, comfortable but unfulfilling. And yet, fear convinces us that moving forward is too risky, that stepping into something new is too uncertain. But if we truly believe in God's plan, if we truly trust that He is working even when we can't see it, then we must also believe that our fear is not bigger than His purpose. And what if instead of looking behind you, you look ahead? Then we must also believe that our fear is not bigger than His purpose. Fear will always be there. It will always try to hold us back, always try to make us doubt, always try to convince us to stay where it feels safe. But at some point, we have to decide, will we let fear dictate our lives, or will we trust that God's plan is greater? Will we choose comfort, or will we choose faith? Will we let our doubts be louder than His voice, or will we step forward? Even when we can't see the whole picture, we may not have all the answers. We may not know what's waiting on the other side of our obedience, but we were never meant to see the whole plan. We were only meant to take the next step, to move forward even when fear tells us to turn back, because the plan has already been written. The way has already been made. Fear may feel big, but it will never be bigger than what God has already set in motion.